Wicked, titled on screen as Wicked Part 1, is a musical fantasy directed by John M. Chu. It's an adaptation of the stage musical of the same name, which was loosely based on the 1995 novel, which was in turn based on the Oz books and the 1939 Touchstone film, The Wizard of Oz. It stars Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, and as a prequel to The Wizard of Oz, Wicked is the story of how the Wicked Witch of the West and Glinda the Good became who they are. While pitched to teenage girls like Barbie before it, that is precisely the audience I would want to protect from this film, since its themes and messages are anti-Christian. There's no swearing in this movie, there's very little violence, but the unspoken and often spoken messages undermine a Christian worldview and what we as believers want for our girls. Wicked is interesting to look at, it's full of energy and music, but it gets 1 out of 5 red slippers from this reviewer. Watch this movie at your own peril.
Rocket Pop is going.
Welcome to Rocket Pop Reviews, giving Christian families a reliable source for reviews of movies, shows, books, and podcasts.
Every 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
We're serious about the fun of entertainment.
Nice to be in orbit.
Roger, 0J, and I feel fine.
And now your hosts, Steve Manuel and Jeff Davenport.
All right, having said that, Jeff, here we are, Rocket Pop. One thing we like to do is we like to talk about craft. We ask ourselves, was this a well-made movie? Okay, I think the look gets first mention here. If you take a still of this movie, it looks good. Okay, they spent a lot of money on hair and makeup and lighting and set design. And of course, the look is pretty much all that there is to promote. So it looks really good, but my main complaint here is that the story is not clean. Let me make my case, and then I'd love to get your professional reaction. So I have actually a few problems with the story. One, there's an assumption of a knowledge of the Wizard of Oz, which is surprising to me because I don't expect anybody under the age of 40 who have wandered into the Wizard of Oz and to know the story of it. They've heard references to it. They might have heard of ruby red slippers at some point. They might have heard the phrase, "You're not in Kansas anymore." But do people know the story of the Wizard of Oz? I don't think so. And
an 80-year-old movie.
It's an 80-year-old movie. Okay, so my daughters I watched this with my daughters, and they're asking me questions about the Wizard of Oz, and I'm having trouble answering them. The first 10 minutes of the movie is very disorienting, and many of the setups throughout the movie have no explanation at all. The first setting is in Munchkin Land, where, drum roll, there are normal sized people only. There are no little people here. We are never given an explanation on what makes it Munchkin Land. Why is it Munchkin Land? We only see that name. And I find it very disorienting. And I to this day, I don't understand a lot of the setups. So the setup of the movie, just to get into the story a little bit, is why was the Wicked Witch wicked? This is a prequel to The Wizard of Oz. We're told in the first 15 minutes that Elphaba, who is the future Wicked Witch, is mocked because of her green skin. And we're told in no uncertain terms, this is why she turned out wicked, because she justifiably reacted to the abuse heaped upon her by others. I don't care for that message. I'll get to that later. Then, again, I'm talking about the story. At about 30 minutes into the movie, we've usually established the story of a movie by 30 minutes in. We're told that what Elphaba really wants is to meet the wizard. And by the way, the Wizard of Oz never gets a proper introduction. We don't know who he is in that world. We don't know what his place is or why one would want to meet him.
I'm with you. She does this big song about I want to meet the wizard and I. It's a big song.
Yeah.
Wait, but why? In the original, in The Wizard of Oz, I want a heart.
Of course.
I want to go home.
It was a very simple story.
It was clear stakes and clear goal. This, you are. I think you could pause it at any point and turn to the little girl next to you who's loving it and go, now why is she wanting that? I don't know.
Exactly
I
right.
don't know.
It's exactly right. I felt exactly that when she was singing about how bad she wanted to see the wizard. I was going, where did that come from? And what do you hope out of it?
Yes.
Moving on. At 90 minutes into the movie, that's usually where most movies start. This is a very long film. At 90 minutes, there's a new plot line. There is a magical book called The Grimoire, which is written in a lost language, and nobody can read it. We don't know why this book is important, where it came from, who's tried to read it in the past. We just know now this is the important thing, that this book has to be read in a lost language by somebody and nobody can read it. I have a guess at who's going to be able to read it. At 2.5 hours into the movie, a monkey starts growing wings. And Glinda, who is going to be the good witch in The Wizard of Oz, she exclaims, "You did it." And we have no idea what was done or why. I still don't know whether it was good or bad that monkey grew wings. In short, and I'm going to throw it to you to get your reaction, this feels like a bedtime story that you make up on the spot, where you pick up a new toy and you talk about it for a while. When you run out of story, you pick up another toy and go, and there's also a magic plate, and the plate has to get up to the nursery table. It's like, what? I was thrown constantly. It's poorly crafted and difficult to follow. That's what I think of the craft of this movie.
Let me step back to the look. The look was not my cup of tea. I don't like the pastel, what I would say Dr. Seuss look. You mentioned
Exactly
like,
right.
I'm wearing a jacket with a big collar and crazy hair. I don't like that.
Yes.
That's not my thing.
Yes.
Going back to the look, I do think there are more than a few times where, obviously, as any modern movie goes on, the further it gets into the movie, the more CGI they go for. But there are certain moments where it's clearly they're using what are called practical sets, like they
Yes.
actually built a set. I always appreciate that. I like it when someone's walking in front of something that is real.
I thought the same. I thought there is a shockingly low amount of CGI in this movie. I expected a lot more. So I also appreciated that. It was real what they were doing and seeing.
There's a we'll talk about the music in a moment, but there is a big musical number. I think it's in the middle, maybe a third of the way through, where it's a bunch of people dancing in a library that's moving. Well, that could have looked awful. It could have just looked like blue screen. They really built a lot of this stuff where they're dancing on the ceiling, kind of Fred Astaire type of thing. They did that for real. I'll give them kudos that they could have done it strangely on the cheap with CGI, and it made it look bad. It actually looked pretty good. Let me talk about the story. Let me hit what you were talking about, the story.
Yeah.
Okay, well, first off, I'm not with you on this. I think more people, young people, have some understanding of The Wizard of Oz than they should for a 1939 movie. I think so. I know my daughters have seen it. They like it. I couldn't agree more. It does feel like someone making up a story as they go.
Yes.
So the story in and of itself is the kind of thing that you'd have to watch this movie like 4 or 5 times to maybe track it. So on first viewing, you're just kind of letting stuff wash over you. And it's not that different, I guess, than even a good James Bond movie where you're like, I think he wants to get over here, but I just know the bad guy has to die. And you're like, okay, I'm along for the ride. I think that's how most people view the story of Wicked. So my 10-year-old and 12-year-old, they love the music. So I was talking to my 12-year-old and I said, tell me about this. What did you love about this movie besides the music? She goes, their voices are great. Okay, all right, their voices are great, and you love the songs. The story, I think it's either you like the songs or you don't. I was telling my daughter, I'm not Mr. Musical, but let's say there's sort of a continuum here. And over on this end is like Hamilton, something really modern and a little odd, we would say. And over here, Rodgers and Hammerstein, old-fashioned classics, Oklahoma. And let's say Menken and Ashman, the Beauty and the Beast guys, are like right here. This is somewhere in the middle, maybe a little bit. This Stephen Schwartz guy's stuff is a little bit more towards the Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin type stuff, but not quite there. I find some of the songs pretty catchy. I walk around because the girls are singing Defying Gravity. Like that goes through my head a lot. But to me, this movie is songs. It's like Greatest Showman. Nobody's watching Greatest Showman because, gosh, this story. They're like, I want to see this song, and then I want this song, and then I want this song. I think it's the same with this movie. I was telling my wife, this movie could make even more money if they made a truncated 1 hour version where it's song, song,
Just the
song,
songs.
song. Now, I want to direct you to somebody else real quick. Ben Shapiro, conservative stalwart Ben Shapiro, who is incredibly thick musical nerd, did a whole review on this movie that's actually worth watching. He makes a really important point about why these songs don't work as well in this movie. He liked the movie, but here's what he says. He says the original Broadway musical, which he loves, let's say Defying Gravity is a 7-minute song. Well, he says that song is written to have this crescendo moment, boom. He says in the movie, Defying Gravity is a 14-minute song because as the song goes along, we've got to have these fights and then and then, these reaction shots. And then we've got to talk about this. And he says that 7-minute song becomes 14 minutes and you lose all that momentum that you want to feel, that crescendo that you want to feel. And I think this is not uncommon when strict musicals are transformed into movies. They get packed. Going back to length, this movie is 2 hours, 40 minutes long. The Broadway play was 2 hours and 40 minutes long total. And this is the first half. So all of these songs, everything is just stretched out. So any sort of enjoyment you might have of the song just feels like we're going, and now we're in mud. Going, now we're in mud.
Well, I'm going to get a little entertainment value out of imagining nerdy Ben Shapiro with his arms crossed in the theater going, no, no, no.
He loved the movie. He was like, I think this is a great movie, but here's my problems with it. He's
Funny.
It's very funny.
All right, can we move on to messaging?
Yeah, I think this is probably where most people are wanting to hear.
Yeah, Jeff, when we watch a movie, we're asking ourselves not about the entertainment factor first. I'm thinking for a Christian, are the messages that happen in this movie ones that underline and reinforce what we believe and want our children to believe, or do they compete with those beliefs? There are so many messages in this movie that compete with a Christian worldview. I'm going to list 7 of them. Number 1, the premise of the movie is the question, where does wickedness come from? That question is asked to Glenda in the first 5 minutes by a child. This is a huge question and it deserves a good answer. In the ethos of wicked, people act wickedly because they're mistreated, period. That is why people become wicked. It's why the wicked witch became wicked, because she was mistreated. I was so jarred by this moment. I paused the movie. I turned to my daughters. How many people are wicked? They said, all of us. I said, and why are they wicked? They said, sin is in us from conception. I thought, okay. Wicked the movie disagrees, but we can proceed because they know the truth. Okay, let's go on. Wicked the movie strongly disagrees with the idea of wickedness and what it's all about. It's obviously what the movie's named for. It's the whole theme of the movie. My second point about the messaging is that a major message, maybe the message of the film, is accept those who look different. Now, I don't know about you, Jeff. I just feel like this is a tired, irrelevant message for 2025. We have heard this a lot. Our children have had this shoved down their throats for the last 15 years. I'm sure that there are people out there who hate obese people or people with blue hair or people with facial piercings. I don't feel that message resonates. I don't think it's worth a 3-hour movie that's aimed at 15-year-old girls. If they've heard any message in the last 10 years, it's been that. And I just have to throw in, let's talk about what different looking means in Wicked. In every crowd scene, there are men wearing skirts, wearing half pants, half skirts. I think we know what that means. We know that's a code. And every time, for instance, a crowd of women is gushing over a handsome prince, there are always men who are also amorously fawning over the prince. This movie is inclusive in fine ways. There's a girl in a wheelchair, there's people from different ethnic backgrounds, and in unacceptable ways. There are effeminate men throughout this movie, and we are told, I think I can be oversensitive to those things. So I kind of, at a couple of points, paused and, ask my kids as innocently as I can, notice anything? And they're like, there's boys in skirts. Okay. So the whole accept people who look different has a spin to it that I don't think a Christian family would approve of. So, number 3, we are ordered. We are morally obligated, according to the movie Wicked, to empathize, with the green-skinned witch, who is simply not a likable person. I don't think she's written as a likable character. She says in no uncertain terms that she is tired of following the rules. Yawn. We've heard that so many times. She proudly defends her own innate goodness to the bitter end, no matter what she does. And she envisions her. It's always a good question to ask ourselves, what is the protagonist's dream? What would they love to come true? And her great vision of the future is one in which her undiscovered greatness is properly celebrated by everyone. That's her vision. I think that's a gross message to Christian ears. She is presented as perfectly moral, and her every impertinence is warranted, celebrated, and is presented as noble. I stopped the movie several times to make sure my children were tracking with how wrong this was. I was honestly concerned for their hearts. I mean that while I'm watching this movie, because I don't want my children to become that way. So I'm like, are you seeing this? And by the way, we only watched that movie so that we could review it. It's not something that I would expose my children to otherwise. And I don't think I would recommend that, as you're going to hear from me. There were so many moments that I thought, oh boy. Number 4, there's a song about wickedness that Glenda sings early on. And she says, we all know that the wicked are miserable and die alone. And I thought, wait a second, that's not true at all. There are entire psalms that are written about the problem for believers in seeing the success of the wicked. You probably think that a wicked man just left the presidency or has just entered the presidency. Either way, these are very successful people. And I think it's misleading to tell a child wicked people are they're unhappy losers. Well, no, that's not true. They can be very, very successful in life. And we have to have the discernment to know that wickedness is not about the temporary end outcome of their lives, because there's plenty of people that the Bible would describe as wicked who end up rich, surrounded by family on their deathbed, and the world would say they had a successful life. That's what those Psalms are about. Number 5, Elphaba, she's going to be the future wicked witch. She has a vision of meeting the wizard. We talked about that a moment ago, and how wonderful and fulfilling it will be. And when that song happened that you're referring to, where she said, I'm going to meet the wizard, I paused it and told my kids, the wizard now represents God in this movie. And there are several times when people will say, oh, thank Oz. They're clearly saying Oz is God in our world. And I said to my daughters, I guarantee you that when she meets the wizard, she's going to be disillusioned. She's not going to like him when she meets him. Sure enough, that's what happens. Sorry to give this away, but the God figure is shown to be unworthy, and he's so powerless that his hope for control is to use truly powerful people like Elphaba to do his bidding. There's a dialogue where Glenda says, you could apologize and you could get back in the good graces of the wizard, who we know is powerless. And Elphaba says, I can't and won't. I won't play the rules of someone else's game. I've got to trust my own instincts. Then she sings a song where she says, I'm going to try defying gravity and you can't hold me down. I think that's the message of our age, which is being outspoken and bold about who you are. And I don't care who opposes me. I've got to be me and say who I am. Again, those are not messages I want my kids to hear. Before I do 6 and 7, you have any rebuts?
Yeah, I think you're making it sound like all of this stuff is so obvious. I think some of it is. I think that little line about the wicked die alone. Okay, I don't know. That one I kind of go
It was a whole song to make that point.
to make the point that they die alone.
That wicked people, we all know who's wicked. It's the unhappy people. That was, I think it's the first song.
Yeah. I think the biggest messages so far that you've mentioned are you be you and you be proud. Like that's so, yeah. A, that's not what the Bible says. And B, aren't we all a little exhausted by that message? Like that's not an original thing.
Yes.
I'm with you also on different is okay. All right. Yes. We've
course.
all gotten that. But I think what this communicates is different is better. And
The
that's
most different is the most better.
yes. And that's obviously an exhausting thing. Let's say the generous way of looking at this movie is if you're looking at somebody and going, a kid and going, hey, just remember, outsiders need to be loved. I don't know. That's not an anti-Jesus message. I know. But you could also say, yeah, I think that dance scene, I found, even though the mechanism of it didn't work, I almost found it touching. Like some awkward kid in high school.
Of course.
And somebody goes, the popular kid is going to reach out to them.
Okay. I'd like to address what you said, which is I totally admit that I'm looking at these messages with a pretty fine-tooth comb.
Yeah.
Yes. That's exactly my concern, is that our children are not looking at these movies with a fine-tooth comb. You could ask a 9-year-old who saw this movie, what did you think of it? What did you think of the messages of this movie?
Mm-hmm.
Be nice to people? Oh, that's great. But they heard the messages about what wickedness is. They heard you've got to stand up for who you are because nobody's going to understand you. All of these things go in. They go in. This is why parents have to watch what our children read, the music they listen to, and the movies that they watch. That's why I think we do Rocket Pop reviews, because we're trying to put a flag on something that you might miss. We did this with Wild Robot. It presents as a really sweet tale. You might just want to watch out for these messages that are in there, and you definitely want to talk through them with your child. So that's what I'm throwing out is there are problematic messages that if you're just interested in the Wizard of Oz and you just want to see how these people became who they are in the Wizard of Oz, you might miss these things. That's why I'm raising my hands. So we are told that we need to choose. Basically, we're contrasted and we need to choose between Glinda and Elphaba. Which one of these is good? There's a question that's asked to us around the time of the popular song, etc. But the fact is they're both self-centered. They're both extremely interested in the praise of others. Neither is humble. Neither is a servant. It's a false question we're being asked. Neither is good. Matter of fact, there is not an example in the entire movie of somebody that a Christian would say, now that's a good character. That's a noble character. And certainly none of them are examples for your children. We wouldn't, goodness gracious, we wouldn't want our children to lionize or idolize either of these characters. Lastly, this is a big point for me. We are told directly by Elphaba, and this happens several times in the movie, but we're told that nobody should ever be looked down upon or be told to keep quiet. Ever. Nobody. Now, is that true? As I asked my children, of course not. Liars and rebels should be told to keep quiet. Impertinent children should be told to keep quiet and learn from their wise parents and elders. And I should be and am commanded biblically to keep quiet. I'm told that I'm supposed to be humble and a learner. I'm supposed to, James says that we should be listening more than we're talking. And being outspoken is a God-given mandate according to Wicked. And the Christian says, no, it is not. So I'll just say in general, wherever messages are given in this movie, and there's not a lot of them, there's not a lot of morality being overtly given to us, but wherever there are messages, I say they're anti-Christian messages.
I think the word you landed on there was outspoken, and I think that's right. I think that's a good winnowing down of what this movie and most modern movies are trying to celebrate is you be outspoken. I was just at dinner with a number of couples the other night, and there was a woman there who that was her highest value, and it made all of us so uncomfortable. And it was like, I dare you to not let me say what I think. And we're all going, well, not all of us, but I know my wife and I and a couple of people were thinking, well, what you're saying is wrong. So I'm not sure being outspoken is a great thing to do at this point.
Yeah.
You're right. I think that outspokenness, we're celebrating outspokenness. Do we want our daughters in high school growing up and going, I'm going to tell the teacher what I think just because Wicked told me? Now, nobody's going to connect those dots. I don't think this movie is doing some massive thing in the minds of kids. I think it is another it's another wave in the ocean of
course,
this.
it's another brick in the wall of a worldview.
Yes, and so watch out that this notion. And by the way, the whole Oz is God thing that becomes pretty stark. I will say, as far as what is the wickedness worldview, I think you have to see part 2 to understand the whole of it. I'm not making an excuse for this movie in and of itself, but I think, and I'm not a fan of this, but I think they are trying to go, now maybe maybe you heard the story of Wizard of Oz wrong. Okay, great. That's a creative choice they've made. And so by the end, maybe we're going, she's not wicked because actually these other people were wicked. That doesn't excuse what's going on in this movie, but I do think there's a larger story that they're trying to tell.
Yeah, we've said this before. I immediately get my hackles up when in films we are told, you think this is a bad person, but have you ever thought about why they're bad? And then you get the movie The Joker. And the whole point of it is to show you this guy's been put upon. It's understandable why he turns into a violent murderer and encourages other people to do the same. I always think it's wrong what he's doing. I'd like to talk just for a second about one scene early on in the movie. There's little kids making fun of 6-year-old green Elphaba, and they're making fun of her for being green. And she becomes angry, and she, with supernatural powers, lifts up a bunch of rocks and then throws the rocks at the kids. And the kids run away screaming. And the nanny for Elphaba says to her, it was wrong of them to make fun of you. That's the moral lesson of that scene. And forgive me again for sounding preachy here, but I pause it and I'm trying to check in with my own daughters. What was the evil in that scene? And they said, well, the kids shouldn't have made fun of her. Yes. And she shouldn't have thrown rocks at them. Also true. But if somebody is seen as victimized in any way, then they are completely licensed to do whatever they feel to do.
That is the modern shadow side of empathy or sympathy. You look at someone and you go, your life has been so hard, you're not culpable.
That's right.
That's an unbiblical idea.
That's right. And just to revisit, I know we got to get to Family Fit, but just to revisit what you just said about girls, and this is a movie about girls. What's hanging on the walls of our home is the passage from 1 Peter 3 that says that what God esteems in a girl is a gentle and quiet spirit. And that's simply absent from this movie. It's not even seen as an option that you would quietly take mistreatment, for instance, as the Bible commands us to take mistreatment and to bless when others curse you, etc. Absent from the worldview of this movie.
We always have to look at a movie and go, someone is the hero.
Yes.
And that could be a drama, that could be an animated movie, that could be a Marvel movie, but there's a hero. And we have to look at that hero and say, what character traits are being celebrated here? So Marvel movie might be self-sacrifice, friendship, but it could also be something really Christian worldview. And it's hard for me to come up with many things about Elphaba that fit into the good Christian world, like the that we would want this celebrated. You'd have to
Yeah.
stretch and go, I don't know, she's willing to stand up when something's bad. Maybe that's it. But everything that seems to define her as a hero are bad things. And I really like the point you make. We're supposed to feel this, I don't know, yin yang of Elphaba and Glinda. And like Glinda's actually the bad one because she's so petty and silly. But you're right. Both of them are not worth celebrating. Both of them are not worth celebrating. They both have really bad things.
You remind me of a movie I saw recently on an airplane, a favorite of both of ours, Bridge of Spies. I recently saw that movie again because I know I love it. So I sat through it again, and the great value of this man, the hero of that movie, is that he put his own life at risk for the sake of others, and not even his own wife knew what he was doing. There's a moment at the end of that movie when it hits his wife, what he has done for her and for the country, the United States of America. I cannot not get well up and weepy at that moment, because not only because it is every man's fantasy that his wife would respect her the way that that wife respects her husband, but because you go, that's our boy. That's our boy who's laying it down. He keeps his mouth shut. He gets no praise from anybody, but he sacrifices himself for the sake of others. That just couldn't be more absent from the movie Wicked. So
let's extract out a lesson for movie watchers. Anytime you're watching a movie, especially with your kids, ask, who is the hero? What's good about them? Like, what do we like? What do we admire about them? Or what are things this is supposed to be the hero of the movie. What's not in line with what we believe and how we believe we're supposed to be? And I think Elphaba is a great example of someone who's not that.
Okay, family fit. I've got to say, I wish I didn't have to keep piling on this movie, but I have to say this. In the first 5 minutes of the movie, there's drunkenness, adultery, there's a bastard child born, and there's supernatural or occultic powers in the first 5 minutes of the movie. My daughters looked at me like, are we going to keep watching this? I was like, I'm sure it's just set up. I'm sure there's going to be singing and dancing in a minute. That, to me, those first 5 minutes would leave out anybody under the age of 12 from seeing this movie. I would not expose my children to that. The thing is, anybody over the age of, say, 16 would find all of the above messaging that I've just talked about contrary to Christian values, confusing. I mean, at worst would confuse you and lead you astray, perhaps, to think this is what a hero is. So I don't think this is a healthy movie for anybody to see. You might have a different answer to that.
I can be swayed over there. The songs my daughters listen to, I'm like, those are like listening to them on the Alexa or whatever. Okay, those are fine songs. The movie in and of itself, again, I think it's attractive only because it's like it's like strung together music videos of the songs they like.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, if let's say your girl is 13 and she's begging to see this, and you're like, okay, I'm going to let her see this. Have this talk with her. Like, go, I need you to know what's going to come through this, or steer them clear.
Yeah, I think that's a dangerous move, because all of the juice at school and on trailers and on TV, all the juice is behind this movie. And I think you set yourself up to be, well, I'm the strange one. I'm the oddball. But yes, I would say the same. If you just can't help it, my children are going to be exposed to this movie, please, for God's sake, talk through it with them. So, here's my summary, Jeff. Wicked is a groomer movie for haughty self-exaltation. And it's one of many princess movies that teach that straying from the prescribed path is brave and virtuous. Its protagonists are both self-centered. There's a morality in this film which fits squarely in the modern ethic that says that the most put upon are the most holy, or for whatever the reason. And in it, the God figure is outed as a powerless nincompoop, and the best thing that anybody could do would be to rebel against him. I know I sound like a thundering Bible basher, but I do think this movie is dangerous fodder for young minds. If you want a great, upbeat musical, show your kids Aladdin or heck, The Sound of Music. Avoid Wicked, which in my estimation lives right up to its name.
3, 2, 1, 0.
Thanks for listening to Rocket Pop Reviews. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. See you next time for another family-friendly review.